Good evening, everyone. I'm having one of those nights, so I figured I would choose a topic from my book, my notebook, and you know, I want to talk about trauma, and we all have experienced, most of us, I can't speak on everyone's behalf, have experienced some type of trauma in their life where things carry over. I have my own personal trauma, and I shouldn't blame anyone else for my drinking. I won't get into that today, but I'll speak more to that, and that was in my prior life. I'm happy to say, but I really wanted to focus on trauma, and I'm gonna make sure my TV is not up too loud. If you hear background music, it's just kind of calming for me. So it sounds to me and it looks to me like when I'm connecting with people, that a lot of things from the past memories, past pains, hurts, traumas, are being brought to the forefront for a lot of people with the chaos of the now. How do we start to heal the memories of the past, the traumas of the past, so that they don't keep hurting us in the present? I'm not a doctor, but these are just my thoughts. Well, the first thing I would say is, sometimes there's a crisis, and well-meaning mental health professionals rush in to discuss the trauma, while it's still happening. That's, to me, is a really bad idea. I'm no expert, but people are generally traumatized because something actually horrible happened, and dwelling on it in the moment just makes it worse. Okay? It's not like anybody has a solution. Here's how you should understand this. Someone's just shot up your kid's school. Here's how you should understand this. That'll make it all better. It's like, no, it won't. If you have old baggage, let's say, that often comes up if you're having an argument with someone. Doesn't it, how it is, it's partially why people don't like to have a dispute within a relationship, because it's a thread, and you pull on that thread, and just, God, that we had another rule. Do not agree with something you don't agree with. Like, if we decide, you and me, that we're doing this, we don't go back and say, well, I didn't really mean it. We don't get to play revisionist with our history. So if you don't agree, So if you fight, object, or hold your peace, okay? Because you see what happens when couples is there's a little fight, okay? And then one says together, yeah, but you did this. And then that person says, yeah, I know I did that. But then that was because you did this. And each of these gets bigger and bigger until what's on the table is, why the hell should we stay together at all? Okay, all right. And so every fight becomes, why the hell should we stay together at all? So that's another thing you want to do, is you want to have the fight about this thing, not about everything in the past. Not everything. It's like, okay, you were flirting. I think you were flirting more than you should have been. Okay, so I go away and I think, well, okay, maybe I was okay. Well, then we have to have a discussion about, we have to have a discussion about why, and maybe we can solve that, but mostly what we have to do is figure out how to not have that happen again. Okay, so we're going to go see the same couple again. What is it that you want me to do? So I'm the flirtatious one. Let's say, what do you want me to do? Well, you have to figure that out. It's like, no, I'm stupid. Like, you are equally stupid. I need to know what would satisfy you, and you need to figure out what would satisfy you, so I know. And that, like, that's also extremely useful, is let your can establish your conditions of satisfaction, make them explicit, let the other person know. You can't read someone's mind. Okay, we're very bad at that. We're bad at reading our own minds, for that matter. Yeah, so if I have a fight with my boyfriend, let's say, and sometimes I remember to say, okay, what do you right now? What can I do? What should I say? I say and mean, and you think, well, you shouldn't let the other person put words in your mouth. Well, fair enough, I'm not asking for something false. I'm saying I'd like to not have this happen again. Can you see a way out? Is there something I can do to increase the probability that that's the route we could take? And sometimes that works. Okay. But the other person has to let you know what they would find satisfying. So what they find satisfying, I mentioned, sexual shame. It triggered something about just the shames of the past that people tend to hold on to. I think I might have mentioned before, the last time I'm not sure if you know. I do know someone who was sexually abused when they were a kid, and a man that I did know for a few years, and I held on to that secret, the shame. And if anyone ever knew about this, I would never, that person may feel like they never be loved. I know, right? Because you feel contaminated permanently. Yeah, I would, I wouldn't have, maybe they wouldn't have any guy friends, no girlfriends. Maybe somebody wouldn't find them attractive. My parents would sit down, disown me, and now he went down the rabbit hole, these stories, and they're the only one that this has ever happened to. I never saw any examples of this happening to right, till after, years that have been happening, and they started to heal and sharing that shame in many different therapeutic experiences allowed for the healing process for them. So I'm, out of curiosity, I was thinking was all the work and the different people that I've worked with over a couple decades in the field of HR, I've been disclosed information about certain things, and shame if, abuse or trauma, or just saying anything, whether it be small or big, or any type of shame that they might have had. How does someone release shame in a healthy manner so that it doesn't make them a prisoner of these emotions of the past that holds them back? Well, I hinted at a few things, okay? What I just described, what happened to this person, and they said, well, first of all, I thought I was the only person this had ever happened to. They said it's like, no, it's a universal human experience to one degree or another. Now, I'm not saying everyone was sexually abused, and I'm certainly not saying that some people aren't sexually abused to a degree that's so extreme it's unimaginable. Where there are others, get off relatively lightly, but it's well within the realm of normative human experience, that sex goes wrong in some way. At least you regret, okay, or they regret something that's happened, something you've done or something that was done to you. So putting it into whence, when you're the only person that something has happened to, that's really not good, right? Because it alienates you from yourself. You have no idea what to do with that, and so that's sometimes why people find it a relief to have their illness diagnosed. It's like, oh, this is known. There's a category, other people have had this experience, maybe there's a pathway through it. So just knowing that you're not the only person like that can be very helpful. I'm updating, it's like how you were, maybe they were like 5. Okay, well, one thing to realize when you're 25 and you were abused when you were 5 is that you're not 5 anymore, right? Right, that the person to whom that happened is no longer there. You're there, but so you might feel afraid of relationships. You might feel afraid of all sorts of things, but a lot of that was you're sort of feeling that like residual 5-year-old I tell a story about one person that I had worked with. She was abused by her older brother, and she told me the story, and I drew a picture in my head while she was, I kind of pictured her at 5, and this hulking teenager, taking advantage of her. But as she told the story, I realized that her older brother was only a year or 2 years older than she was. While he was 7, was like, okay, well, she wasn't the victim of a a male in some sense. They were 2 badly supervised children. Now, that doesn't mean that what he did was right, but she was still the 5-year-old in the memory, but she was 27 when she came to see me. And so the first thing I did was just point out that it's like, think about the 7-year-olds, okay? Think about the 7-year-olds that right? For a 5-year-old, a 7-year-old is an adult. For an adult, a 7 and a 5-year-old are clearly both children. Well, that just changed things somewhat. It made her feel less vulnerable in that moment. What your brain wants from you in relationship to a trauma memory is indication that you're no longer vulnerable to the same problem. That's what memory is for, right? You remember something bad and you process it so that you change your interpretation or your behavior or the situation, or whatever you can change so that it isn't going to happen in the future. And that if you do that thoroughly, you'll generally let yourself rest. You have the memory to protect yourself from it happening again. Well, that's the purpose of memory in general. You make sense of your past behavior so that the good things that happen to you can be duplicated and the bad things can be avoided. It's not to make an objective record. the world. It's to make a functional map of the world that you can apply to the future. And so yeah, how do we let go? How do we disassociate something that happened a year ago, 10 years, 20 years ago, that is no longer happening, but it seemed to be triggering us? Oh, it's very difficult. I would say, one of the things that we need to develop is, if we have an experience like the one that girl had, you have, perhaps because I don't know the details, probably need a theory of malevolence. You need an explanation. It's like, how could a person do that? Well, you have it. What if the explanation isn't good? They were just a bad person. They just, well, then you need a philosophy of bad. You need a philosophy of evil. You have to understand it so that you're no longer a victim of it. Okay? Because otherwise you can't put the event a context in a context, right? And sometimes that means the development of a real philosophical sophistication, and that can help, because then you can start to separate out malevolence from benevolence, because maybe you're afraid of any intimate relationship now because it's been contaminated within that, and everything's fuzzy and foggy. And so you need to understand the person who did this, at least to some degree, so that you can separate that person out from all the other people around you who that you encounter in situations that might be reminiscent of it. So you felt vulnerable, for perhaps you felt ashamed, and all of those things have to be gone through. What do you think? When you're ashamed, what elicits that, what are the eliciting cues? What to do, think when that happens? All of that has to be taken apart, right? And I said this beyond order book, or I can't remember the name of the book, but if you have a memory older than a few months, it bothers you, right? It's still got emotional resonance. Write it out older than 18 months ago, or older than 18 months ago, or more. Otherwise it's not really in the past. Otherwise, right, it's still happening. That whether you should develop into something, how you should develop into something traumatic that's currently happening, is a whole different issue. But if it's an old memory and it still bothers you, it means that you haven't, or it could mean that you haven't decomposed that experience sufficiently. to detach it from the emotion. So imagine when something terrible happens to you. You don't understand it. So then you might say, well, if you don't understand something that's happening to you, how can it be terrible? Because it doesn't terrible mean that you understand it. And the answer is, well, you understand things in stages. And the first way you understand a terrible thing is by freezing in terror or running. That's the understanding. It's not conceptual, it's embodied and emotional. And so event terror, that's the first category. Okay, now the next question is, how do you get it out? How do you get it out of the terror? Okay, how do you get out of the terror? You get out of the terror, well, you realize that nothing truly dangerous is happening. Well, what if something truly dangerous did happen? Then you elaborate, you view the world to the point where you're no longer vulnerable to that terrible thing. And that's extremely difficult. So the memory of something terrible, okay, stays terrible until you effortlessly process it and decompose it into, well, often into a much more sophisticated map of the world. And it's really hard to do. It's really hard to do that. So I hope that made sense to you guys. And the reason I want to talk about trauma is because as I speak to more people, substance abuse, whether it's alcohol or not, alcohol's the easiest drug in the world to get, right? We're going to talk about alcohol in the near future, but I want to also talk about destroying your negative beliefs, and really just how do we turn around the way we think about things. You know, I mentioned I had trauma in my past, and alcohol made me believe that I needed it to deal with that trauma. It tricked me. It tricked me. So I hope you have a good evening. I apologize if I stammer. I try to do things from memory, and my medications kind of have me messed up, and I'm not feeling that well in my tummy. So please give me your thoughts. I'm trying to tie things into addiction and trauma, and I'm not a doctor, but I can give my points of view and make some suggestions. I have a lot of time to do reading. So I hope to hear from you guys. Thank you for all the prayers. I'll let you know how my doctor appointment goes tomorrow. I'll take some video as we get there. I'm kind of nervous. I'm seeing a different liver doctor. Same place, it's just my liver doctor's always on vacation. And I said something needs to happen because I can't, I'm sick every night. So I love and appreciate you, each person that tunes in. Let me know your thoughts. Thank you and have a wonderful night.